Hi, everybody. So my name is Killian Donaher, and I'll be your moderator today. And welcome to our SGS webinar. So a few housekeeping guidelines just to start it off. At the bottom of your screen, you're going to see multiple application widgets, which you can use, and they're fully resizable and movable. You can expand your slide area or maximize it to the full screen by clicking on the arrows on the top right corner. Submitting your questions through the Q&A widget. We will try to answer these during the webcast, but unanswered questions will be addressed via email. Please know we do capture all of the questions. For the best view and experience, I recommend you using a wired internet connection and closing any programs or browser sessions running in the back. The webcast is being streamed through your computer, so there is no dial-in number. And for the best audio quality, please make sure your computer speakers or headset are turned on and the volume is up so you can hear the presenters throughout their presentations. Some networks cause slides to advance more slowly than others, so logging off your VPN is recommended. If your slides are behind, push F5 on your keyboard and it will refresh the page. Additional answers to some common technical issues are available in the help widget at the bottom of your screen, and an on-demand version of this webcast will be available approximately 1 day after the webcast happens and can be accessed using the same audience link. So all to SGS and SGS NutriSource webinar on regulatory readiness for supplement success in the US, Canada, for Amazon and beyond. So our speakers today, we have Jennifer Lott, who is our Technical Development Director of SGS North America and our Business Assurance team. We have Rebecca Terrain, who is our Project Manager in Regulatory Sciences from SGS NutriSource. And then we also have Jason Wong, who is the Director of Commercial Development in SGS North America in the food sector. And then myself, I will be your moderator. My name is Killian Donaher, and I'm the Business Development Manager for the West Coast in the Food Division. So just some quick points on SGS. Globally recognized, we have 99,000 employees strategically located around the US. SGS works across 5 focus areas throughout the supply chain, providing specialized business solutions that improve quality, safety, productivity, and reduce risk. Our network of over 2,500 offices and laboratories help customers navigate an increasingly regulated world by offering local expertise on a global scale. Today, we are one of the leading providers in testing, inspection, and certification, the leading provider of competitive advantage, driving sustainability and delivering trust, the globally recognized benchmark for quality and integrity, and we continue to push ourselves to deliver innovative services and solutions that will help our customers move their businesses forward. So some of SGS food capabilities. We offer testing services from contaminant, microbiological, chemical, all the way down to non-GMO nutritional analysis. We also do clinical trials. Certification, audit, and inspection. So we are GFSI recognized schemes. So we offer SQF, BRC, the other GFSI schemes. We have HACCP and GMP and ISO accreditations. In the digital and innovation, we have food origin and integrity, advanced molecular testing, isotopicity support. We have software called DigiComply. We have our label compliance review team. We have FSMA and US regulation and import. We also do GRAS and NDIN assessments. In our training division, we have face-to-face trainings, and then we also have virtually instructor-led training. So real quickly, we're just going to run through the agenda. We did our welcome and introduction. We have the US market essentials, Canadian pathway, e-commerce compliance, global expansion in Korea, test and key takeaways, and then we'll go into our Q&A. And now I'm going to hand it over to Rebecca Train from SGS Nutrisource to speak about US market essentials.
Thank you very much. So we'll start it off with the US market essentials, and we'll start with just definition of a dietary supplement, so what it is. This is a product regulated as a subset of foods in the US, but this category has their own unique definition and requirements under the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994, which is also known as DSHEA. So DSHEA defines dietary supplements, and importantly to this definition is the definition of a dietary ingredient. So in order for an ingredient to be used in a dietary supplement, it must qualify as a dietary ingredient, meaning it has to fit into one of these specific categories. So a vitamin, mineral, herb, or other botanical, an amino acid, a dietary substance, or a concentrate, metabolite, constituent, extract, or combination of the above. In addition to defining the dietary ingredient categories, the DSHEA regulation provides very specific definitions and limitations for a dietary supplement, including that a dietary supplement must be consumed orally, must be labeled as a dietary supplement, meaning that it has a supplement facts panel, and it must not be represented as a conventional food or beverage. So while dietary supplements are regulated as a subset of foods, they are very distinct and unique from conventional foods. So a new dietary ingredient, or NDI, is any ingredient that meets that dietary ingredient definition. So an ingredient that would fit in one of those categories that we just discussed, but was not marketed or sold in the US before October 15th of 1994. For any NDI, a notification must be submitted to FDA prior to introduction into the market. So this is often referred to as the NDIN pathway. This allows for use of that new dietary ingredient, specifically in dietary supplements. The NDIN is required unless the supplement only contains ingredients that are present in the food supply, meaning that the new dietary ingredient could be exempt from the NDIN submission requirement if it is a GRAS ingredient and in the food supply in a chemically unaltered state. So this is where the GRAS pathway comes in as a regulatory option for new ingredients intended for use in a dietary supplement as well. So to define GRAS, this is generally recognized as safe, and it is a regulatory designation that an ingredient is safe for its intended use. It is based on certain criteria, so the recognition of safety through common knowledge of the expert scientific community based on either scientific procedures, which is the most common approach used for a GRAS, or based on history of use of a substance in food prior to January 1st, 1958. This is not as commonly used for GRAS, just as it's challenging sometimes to support the use prior to January 1st, 1958. There are currently two GRAS pathway options that are available. So we have the self-affirmed GRAS and the notified GRAS. The self-affirmed and notified GRAS both have the same data requirements. So it's very important that from a content and a safety perspective, there is absolutely no difference in the requirements for either GRAS dossier, whether it's self-affirmed or whether it's notified. The only difference is that the notified GRAS would be submitted for FDA review and an FDA response would be received. Either of the dossier options currently provides the regulatory status that allows the ingredient to be sold in the US. However, we do want to note that there is some current discussion with the new administration that is asking to reevaluate the self-affirmed GRAS pathway. And so there could be changes to that on the horizon. New legislation in the US does generally take some time to pass, but it's certainly time now to prepare your safety package for the notified GRAS pathway should that become mandatory. So there are some important similarities and differences between the GRAS and NDIN pathways. Both pathways require the same type of information and safety data overall, and both are only for safety information. So in these dossiers, it's a safety focus, and efficacy data should not be included or discussed. The main differences between these are around the confidentiality and publication requirements. So pivotal data for a GRAS must be based on the publicly available safety data. This is generally considered to mean published in a peer-reviewed journal. And this is true for both the self-affirmed GRAS and the notified GRAS dossier. Whereas for the NDIN, you do not have to have all of the pivotal safety data published. It can be included in the NDIN and redacted from the public version. So this allows for some additional confidentiality controls through the NDIN process, and it also can save time for an NDIN dossier compared to a GRAS if you do not have to publish that safety data. For sensitive populations, it's important to understand that GRAS applies to the general food supply. So in order for an ingredient to be GRAS, it has to be safe for the entire general population. You cannot, label out potentially sensitive groups with product labeling, and that's a difference from the NDIN because dietary supplements do allow for exclusion of potentially sensitive groups through product labeling. So you can exclude based on age. You can exclude pregnant women or breastfeeding women, for example. You can also exclude individuals that might have a certain medical condition or be taking certain medications if there's any concern of safety for a particular group or interaction with a particular medication, for example. And then the notification that can impact the timeline as well. So if you are going through the NDIN pathway, the notification is a mandatory part of the process. And so that can add time to the review based on the FDA timeline. And then if you are doing the notified GRAS, that will also add to the timeline because of the FDA review. Whereas the self-affirmed GRAS tends to be the fastest pathway to market because you don't have to go through that additional FDA review process. So now just to share some of the practical tips, best practices, and some lessons learned in our combined 30 years of experience. This is to help speed up the process and ensure a successful and compliant market entry for a new ingredient into the US market. So the first is to ensure that you have the new ingredient well characterized and that the manufacturing is well controlled, produced under appropriate GMPs that are equivalent to the US requirements, and that you have documented that consistent production to the specifications. Excuse me. Also ensure that you have all your components in the manufacturing process that are compliant with US regulations. So this would include things like filters, resins, processing aids, and the packaging that you are putting the finished ingredient into. You also want to check on your heavy metals and contaminants. So FDA is becoming more critical in their assessment of the heavy metals, and they want to see that your specifications are as low as possible based on actual test results. And then finally, FDA has also increased scrutiny on, kind of what we tend to call functional ingredients for the GRAS pathway in particular. And, remember that the GRAS pathway is for general foods. And so ideally, it would have a technical function. And if it doesn't have a technical function in the food, then it must not cause a physiological response at the intended level of use. So it's important to understand if your ingredient has, too much efficacy data, or if it's bioactive, or if it could have impacts on potentially vulnerable populations, or interactions with certain medications, for example. Those can all pose a barrier to the GRAS pathway. And in those cases, the NDIN pathway may be the most appropriate. We'll pass it over to Jen.
Thanks, Rebecca. Now we're going to talk about 21 CFR 111, the FDA's current good manufacturing practice regulations for dietary supplements. These rules are designed to ensure that every product reaching consumers is safe, consistent, and high quality. At their core, they require properly trained and qualified personnel, strong quality control systems, and clearly documented testing procedures. Facilities must be designed and maintained to minimize contamination risk, and equipment has to be regularly cleaned and calibrated to ensure accuracy. Finally, record keeping is absolutely essential. If it's not documented, it's as if it never happened in the eyes of regulators. These practices apply to all dietary supplements manufactured, packaged, or labeled in the U.S., and they form the foundation of compliance for any company in this space. When it comes to dietary supplements, labeling is one of the most complex and heavily scrutinized aspects of compliance. Every label must include a supplement facts panel, not a nutritional facts panel. This means listing serving size, number of servings, all dietary and non-dietary ingredients, as well as product identity, net quantity, directions for use, manufacturing details, and expiration dates, which are just as important as the rules surrounding claims. You cannot state or even imply that your product diagnoses, treats, cures, or prevents a disease. The FDA allows only structure or functional claims like supports healthy joints, and these must be backed by scientific evidence. They also require the mandatory disclaimer, this statement has not been evaluated by the FDA. Many companies run into trouble here, especially with implied disease claims or unsubstantiated statements, so this is a key area to be careful. One of the most overlooked, yet heavily enforced part of labeling is how information is presented and placed. The FDA requires that the mandatory information, like the supplement facts panel, be prominently displayed on either the principal display panel or the information panel. It has to be printed in a font that's at least 1/16 of an inch tall, and there must be enough contrast between the text and the background so it's easy to read. Something as simple as poor placement or small font size can put a label out of compliance. Now, beyond formatting, best practices come down to consistency and vigilance. This means conducting regular label audits, tracking regulatory changes like new ingredient restrictions, and keeping meticulous records for claims, testing, and adverse events. The most common violations we see are unapproved disease claims, missing disclaimers, formatting errors in supplement facts, and misbranding due to misleading information. By building compliance into your routine process, you can avoid these pitfalls and stay ahead of regulatory enforcement. Now I want to shift to 21 CFR 117, which is derived from the Food Safety Modernization Act, or FSMA. Unlike older regulations that were more reactive, FSMA is built around prevention. It begins with a thorough hazard analysis, which identifies biological, chemical, or physical risk that could cause illness or injury. From there, companies must establish preventive controls, which are risk-based measures to minimize or eliminate those hazards identified above. It's not enough to set controls. You also need monitoring procedures to verify they're working consistently. And if something goes wrong, corrective actions must be in place to address the problem and minimize the likelihood of it happening again. This proactive framework fundamentally changes how food and supplement companies manage safety. It's about stopping problems before they ever reach the consumer. One of the most important distinctions in supplement labeling is that products must use a supplement facts panel, not that nutritional facts panel, as I said earlier. Under 21 CFR 101.36, this panel provides consumers with details like serving size, servings per containers, the exact quantity of each ingredient, both dietary and non-dietary. Ingredients must be listed by their common or usual name with their quantitative amount per serving, and when applicable, the percent of the daily value. For example, if you're including calcium, you may need to list not just the amount, but also the source, such as calcium carbonate. Serving sizes are determined by manufacturers, but they must be appropriate and based on established dietary guidelines. And finally, the percent daily value is calculated using FDA's reference daily intakes and daily reference values. Getting this panel right is absolutely critical. It directly impacts consumer trust and regulatory compliance. When it comes to supplement labels, it's not just what you include, but it's also how you present it. So saying again, the FDA is very clear about this mandatory information. It must be legible, easy to find, and displayed on either the principal display panel or the information panel. One common violation is font size. So stating again, it must be at least 1/16 of an inch for the lowercase o, ensuring companies can read it without difficulty. Placement matters too. The information panel is typically positioned immediately to the right of the PDP. You also have to clearly state net quantity, like 90 capsules or 10 fluid ounces, so consumers know exactly what they're buying. And finally, don't overlook that contrast piece. Dark text or light background, for example, to ensure legibility. These details may seem small, but they are among the most frequent points of FDA inspection findings. One of the FDA's biggest areas of focus is claims, specifically what can and cannot be stated on a supplement label. The agency makes very clear distinctions between structure or functional claims, such as supports bone health, which are permissible if substantiated, versus disease claims like prevents osteoporosis, which are strictly prohibited. If you do make a structure or functional claim, it must always be backed by scientific and paired with FDA mandatory disclaimer that this statement has not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Another critical area is allergen labeling. Under the Food Allergen Labeling and Consumer Protection Act, or FALCPA, any major allergen like milk, eggs, peanuts, tree nuts, fish, soy, wheat, or sesame must be declared, even if present in only trace amounts. Failing to disclose allergens is one of the fastest ways to trigger a recall, which can be costly, not just financially, but also to your brand's reputation. So when discussing essential labeling requirements, 3 pillars must be considered. First, the principal display panel, or the PDP. This is the face of your product and must clearly state the product name, net quality, and position the supplement fact panel correctly, all in the required size and format. Second, the supplement facts panel itself must list serving size, servings per containers, and the amount of each dietary agreement along with the daily percentage value when established. And third, the ingredient list and claim section. Here, every ingredient must be listed in the order of weight, and any structure or functional claim needs to be accompanied by proper disclaimers. Don't forget the allergen declarations and warnings, which are also critical for consumer safety. Together, these 3 elements form the foundation of compliant supplement labels. When introducing a new dietary supplement to the market, it's essential to understand the product approval pathways. The first step is pre-market notification. As Rebecca mentioned, if you're using a new dietary ingredient, meaning not one marketed before October 15, 94, you must file a notification with the FDA. This triggers a 75-day review period, so it's critical to factor that timeline into your product launch plans. Next is manufacturing registrations. All facilities involved in producing, packaging, or labeling supplements must be registered with the FDA, and their processes must comply with FDA regulations. And finally, there's the label review process. This includes internal compliance reviews and often third-party verification to make sure all the claims meet regulatory standards. Skipping or rushing any of these steps can delay market entry or result in enforcement action, so careful planning is essential. I want to talk a little bit about Canada now. So when it comes to natural health products in Canada, labeling isn't just about design. It's about compliance, safety, and trust. Health Canada has some of the most stringent regulations in the world, ensuring that consumers are protected and that products are represented accurately and truthfully. Clear and compliant labeling is the foundation of success in this market. A properly designed label communicates quality, efficacy, and regulatory excellence, all while helping your brand stand out in a highly competitive space. Every label tells a story, not just about what's in the bottle, but about your company's commitment to safety and transparency. By aligning with Canada's labeling requirements, you're not only meeting regulatory standards, but you're also building long-term trust with the informed Canadian customer or consumer. Health Canada plays a central role in governing natural health products, and the foundation of this framework is the Natural Health Products Regulation. These regulations are designed to prioritize two critical outcomes: consumer safety and product efficacy. For manufacturers, this means that before any product reaches the market, it must undergo a rigorous review process. Health Canada evaluates safety data, scientific evidence of efficacy, and verifies strong quality control are in place. Only products that meet these high standards are authorized for sale. This regulatory system strikes a balance. On one hand, it provides Canadian consumers with access to natural health products, and on the other hand, it ensures robust oversight to maintain safe and legitimacy of the products. The result is a trusted marketplace where both manufacturers and consumers can have confidence in the products available. When it comes to natural health products in Canada, labeling requirements are very precise, and each element plays a key role in compliance and consumer trust. First, every label must clearly show product identification, the product name, dosage form, route of administration, and most importantly, the natural product number, or the NPN. The number is proof of Health Canada's approval and immediately signals credibility to consumers. Next is the ingredient information. Labels must provide a complete list of medicinal and non-medicinal ingredients, along with potency and standardization details. Transparency here only ensures regulatory compliance, but also empowers consumers to make informed decisions. And finally, usage guidelines are essential. Labels must need to communicate the intended use or purpose, clear dosage instructions, any risk or caution, and proper storage condition. Comprehensive usage details protects consumers and ensure products are used safely and effectively. Together, these elements form the backbone of a compliant labeling and reinforce both safety and trust in the Canadian marketplace. In Canada, bilingual compliance, it's not optional, it is the law. All natural health product labels must display information in both English and French. These requirements ensure accessibility for Canada's diverse population and reflects the respect for the country's two official languages. But bilingual labeling goes beyond simple translating text. It requires cultural sensitivity and precise terminology that resonates with both Anglophones and Francophone consumers. That's why professional translation services particularly those specializing in health products, are so valuable. They help you avoid regulatory delays while ensuring accuracy and cultural appropriateness. At the same time, compliance is more than a checkbox. It's a trust-building opportunity. When consumers see accurate bilingual labels, complete ingredient lists, proper NPN display, they recognize a brand committed to quality and transparency. This builds loyalty, repeat purchases, and positive word of mouth. Ultimately, compliance doesn't just help you avoid penalties, it positions your brand as a trusted partner in Canada's health and wellness marketplace. So I'm going to hand it back to Rebecca.
Thank you. All right, so for the regulatory framework, in Canada, natural health products, those are NHPs, they have their own set of regulations under the overarching Food and Drugs Act, and they are regulated as a subset of drugs. This is different from the US, where dietary supplements are regulated as a subset of foods. And that plays into the kinds of things that you can say about natural health products as well. So NHPs are defined as a product that contains a Schedule 1 substance. So those are listed here for your reference. And they are used in three main areas. So diagnosis, treatment, mitigation, prevention bucket, a restoring, correcting bucket, and then a maintaining or promoting health bucket. So NHPs can function to maintain or promote health, which is similar to dietary supplements, but they can also function in ways that would be considered drugs in the US. So for example, the diagnosis, treatment, mitigation, or prevention of disease is regulated as a drug in the United States. So those are important considerations to understand. NHPs must be safe to use as over-the-counter and self-care products as well. In Canada, the finished NHP product does require a pre-market approval through a product license application or PLA. And every NHP product must have a natural product number or NPN. So unlike a GRAS or NDIN, which are generally ingredient specific, a PLA is only for the finished product. While an NDIN can be for the finished product as well, it's typically used for the novel ingredient itself. Also, unlike a NDIN or GRAS, in order to attain approval for a PLA, NHPs must have a recommended use or purpose that's expressed with a health claim. And this health claim must have a health context. What this means is that a PLA must have both safety, efficacy, and clinical data included in the submission. So pre-cleared information is any form of information that supports the safety, efficacy, or quality of an NHP ingredient or product class that has already been reviewed and determined to be acceptable. So these can be product monographs, or other abbreviated labeling standard information. PCIs can be used to speed up the evaluation of the NHP. And for novel ingredients that are not in any PCI information, a master file can be used to submit ingredient-specific safety, efficacy, or quality data. In lieu of a master file, the safety or efficacy evidence for a novel ingredient can also be included in the PLA directly. The PLA system uses three classes to determine the extent of review and the timeline required. So Class 1 PLAs attest to a single Health Canada monograph. Class 2 attest to multiple monographs, and Class 3 can attest to monographs, but also include information that would require additional agency assessment. So that would be things for product-specific clinical data or novel ingredients. For an NHP product with a novel ingredient, a Class 3 PLA would be required and would include the safety and or efficacy evidence, or if there's a master file, that can be referenced for the novel ingredient. And now we will continue on with some Korean market essentials. So there is a lot of interest in entering the Korean market, as Korea is one of the few countries in the 30-50 club economies. So that's defined as 30,000 per capita gross national income and 50 million in population. So that does make Korea a really great market to target. And market entry in Korea is governed by several laws and acts under the food safety regulations. And we're going to focus on the health functional foods, which fall under the food compliance codes, as these are most similar to dietary supplements in the US. So both the health functional foods and the food and food additive classifications have two main approval pathways. Individual recognition, or the IR, is most similar to the NDIN pathway for dietary supplements in the US, and temporary recognition, or TR, is most similar to the GRAS pathway for food in the US. For health functional food ingredients, the two pathways that are available are notified, which applies to ingredients that are already on the pre-approved list, and IR, which applies to new or novel ingredients or to an ingredient that a company wants to have exclusivity for. For the IR pathway, a safety and efficacy dossier is required. So the dossier requirements for the IR pathway are generally similar to the requirements for a GRAS or NDIN. So while a GRAS or NDIN is not automatically accepted as equivalent, the data set can be leveraged for the health functional food dossier. The important distinction there, however, is that the functional food ingredients are required to have that efficacy data for health claims. And on top of that, Korean regulators do require a mechanism of action as well. So again, this is different from the GRAS or NDIN, which is completely safety focused and does not include efficacy discussion points. So just to kind of compare the markets that we've talked about so far, this is a slide outlining some of the similarities and the differences for the pathways in the US, Canada, and Korea. And just to highlight a few of the important aspects, the safety evaluation versus the safety and efficacy evaluation requirements for Canada and Korea. And then also the clinical trial data that is mandatory for Canada and for Korea for those classifications as well. Also to note that both the NDIN and GRAS are not pre-market approval processes. The NDIN is a pre-market notification that's required, and then the GRAS is also a pre-market notification, which is currently optional via the notified GRAS process. Right, I'll hand it back to Jen.
As more companies look beyond the US market, international harmonization becomes critical. In Canada, natural product numbers, or NPNs, align closely with FDA supplement fact panels, making dual compliance easier to achieve. In the European Union, products often fall under the Novel Food Regulation, which requires pre-market authorization. The good news is that safety data submitted to the FDA can often be leveraged for EU approvals as well. Australia takes a slightly different approach, with the Therapeutic Goods Administration listing many supplements as medicine, complementing the FDA's GRAS determinations. To manage all these frameworks efficiently, many companies adopt a master label strategy, essentially developing a core template that meets the requirements of multiple jurisdictions simultaneously. This approach reduces cost, shortens launch times, and allows brands to scale globally without having to reinvent compliance at every step. Now back to Rebecca.
So let's jump now to some e-commerce discussion, and we'll start with an Amazon overview. So under Amazon's new policy, sellers must work with an approved third-party organization to test, inspect, and certify their products. Third-party verification validates that products meet regulatory standards, including the proper manufacturing and labeling. So the three pillars are GMP validation, label validation, and testing validation. To note as well for the labeling validation, Amazon's requirements verify to their label standard, which is not a complete and full label review and doesn't account for all label requirements under US regulations. So it is important to still ensure that your product label meets both the Amazon label standard and also the US regulatory requirements as well. Amazon's label standard focuses on the main mandatory elements being present, no drug claims being made, and confirmation that the nutrition information is in a supplement facts panel, not a nutrition facts panel. So SGS can support the Amazon compliance review as a TIC provider. And to initiate this compliance review, the following information would be necessary. So product label images, GMP compliance documentation, and company contact information. Product labels must be complete and clear PDFs of your current labels. They must include a supplement facts panel, and they must match what is on your Amazon listing page. The GMP certification documents should be obtained directly from your contract manufacturer, and this is a really important piece of documentation, and without it, you will not be able to pass the Amazon verification process. And I'll pass back to Jen.
Oops, I jumped ahead. So selling natural products on Amazon presents both huge opportunities and unique compliance risk. One of the most critical factors for success is avoiding delisting. This means keeping your product titles and descriptions fully FDA compliant, steering clear of prohibited disease claims, and monitoring your listings regularly for compliance. Proactive communication with the Amazon seller support can also help resolve issues before they escalate. Amazon can also be a powerful platform for building brand awareness. Strategies here include utilizing enhanced brand content with an educational focus, optimizing keywords to make your products easily discoverable, and actively managing customer reviews to maintain credibility. Finally, don't forget Amazon's own advertising compliance protocols. Following them ensures you take advantage of promotional tools without running into regulatory or platform issues. By combining compliance discipline with smart brand building, companies can thrive in this competitive marketplace. To make compliance more manageable, we recommend following a structured action plan. In weeks 1 and 2, start by auditing your current state, review all your labels and claims and Amazon listings against FDA requirements, and document any gaps or risk. Then in weeks 3 or 4, move into developing corrections. This could mean delisting or redesigning labels, revising product descriptions, or preparing new dietary ingredient notifications when required. By week 5 and 6, it's time to implement. Submit your regulatory filings, update your Amazon listings, and establish monitoring procedure. And finally, never forget, compliance doesn't stop after launch. It's an ongoing effort. This means conducting quarterly reviews, staying up to date with regulatory changes, and proactively managing your Amazon account. By approaching compliance in clear time phases, you can reduce the risk of missteps and keep your products on the market with confidence. As we wrap up this section on compliance, there are just a few key takeaways. And what I want to share is that FDA regulations are non-negotiable. That means building compliance into every product development and marketing decision rather than treating it as an afterthought. Secondly, think globally. By harmonizing your strategies across multiple marketplaces, you can reduce costs, avoid duplicate work, and accelerate international expansion. And third, Amazon excellence. Proactive compliance management on Amazon not only prevents costly delisting, but also builds long-term credibility and success in the marketplace. So now I hand it over to Jason.
Thank you, Jennifer. So yeah, I'm Jason. I'm here to talk a little bit about testing and instrumentation and the kind of technology that we use to help our clients to stay compliant, to get the product checked. So in SGS, especially in North America, we house the following technologies to help with the testing side of things. So for example, ICP-MS, ICP-OES, these are the instrumentation that we use for mineral testing, whether that's high-level minerals or trace-level minerals, like things like heavy metals and speciated arsenic. We have HPLCs to deal with the vitamins, amino acids, and bioactive testing. The GC, GCMS to do the pesticides, solvents, and volatile contaminant testing. And LCMS-MS to do the mycotoxins, drug residue, and also the low-level vitamins that we have to test for. A good example would be vitamin B12. So here to talk about a little bit about testing method selection and why is that very important. So the common testing choices by raw materials manufacturers might include USB monograph, titration, UV vis, and near infrared. The reason why these methods are more common among raw material manufacturers is because they're easier to set up. They don't require the instrumentation setup like HPLC, LCMS, MS. They can do the testing relatively quickly in benchtop setting. And these are very good methods for single ingredient product. And quite frankly, this is what the USB monograph is designed for. Now, when it comes to finished product testing, we usually see a different set of methods or instrumentation that is being employed. So that will include HPLC, LCMS-MS, ICP-MS, and sometimes titration. The reason for this is because these methods will provide higher specificity. They could single out the signal of the target compound they're looking for, so then it's less chances of having signal interference. And also, it's much more specific, and you can also target any contaminant compounds in there by looking at the chromatograms. Now, I'm going to use a specific example, magnesium citrate. Now, in a raw material setting, the best way to check for purity would be by USB monograph, which is a titration-based method. Or one can check for the total magnesium content by ICP or atomic absorption. However, when it comes to the case of a finished product where there's multiple magnesium input inside the product, common would be a multivitamins, minerals product. Using USB monograph is not gonna work most likely because you're dealing with many materials in the product that might interfere with the titration method. So the best way to go about it would be actually to test for the magnesium, the total magnesium by ICP or AA. Now, in most cases, when it is in a finished product setting, one cannot really test for the magnesium citrate content. One can only do a target element magnesium and try to back calculate from there. And that's my portion.
Thank you very much, Jason. Thanks for giving us guidelines on testing and breaking all of that down. And thank you to Jennifer and to Rebecca for presenting on the regulatory compliance side of things. I wanted to make before we move on to the Q&A is we do have additional access to webinars, live recordings, live events, and basically it's a valuable information site for our clients to keep pushing the needle forward through compliance and testing with free information. So we do have a YouTube, we post there weekly, and if you want to go ahead and follow the link, you can subscribe or follow the QR code and subscribe to our YouTube. We would greatly appreciate that. So one also thing to mention is we will be at SupplySide West, SupplySide Global, this October from the 29th to the 30th. Our booth number is 6152, and book a meeting to discuss anything that we have talked about today in our webinar, or if you want additional information, or a few further questions that may not be addressed today. Please do book a meeting with our team. We have experts from all over North America, from our different divisions that will be there to answer any questions that you may have. And now let's jump straight into our Q&A. I'll just pull some Q&A from the ones that have been submitted. We'll start with Jennifer Lott. So, do warehouses that only sell final products to direct customers ship packages to direct customers need to be FDA registered?
Yes. And they also need to make sure that they have what we term as, good manufacturing practices or good housekeeping practices in place. And even though you're not manufacturing and you're only housing finished packaging there, you need to ensure there's no risk of contamination from foreign materials, from pests, security issues are taken care of. And there's a number of things that are covered under that aspect of making sure the product is still safe and legitimate. And we also look in that type of review about cross contact with any allergens that may be present.
Okay. Another question is regarding the Canadian regulations. What is the difference between Schedule 1 substances and medicinal ingredients listed in the monographs?
I'm going to refer that to Rebecca.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. For that question, I think we can follow up with our subject matter experts on that and reply via email.
Okay. So what is the typical turnaround time for a label compliance assessment for the US market, Rebecca?
Yes, I can take that one. So for a single label, it's generally 5 to 8 business days. If there are multiple labels, then it can vary, but that's kind of the starting point.
Okay. And there's an additional question on South Korea. Can you speak on confidentiality challenges with South Korea? Korean government has in the past shared ingredient manufacturer confidential info with the finished product partner in Korea. Will Korea honor confidentiality?
Yeah, so I can take that one as well. We're very happy to help with that question, and we have a great Korean partner that we work with who understands the ins and outs of that kind of filing. So we suggest to discuss that further via email with our team, and we can definitely help with that.
Okay. I see there is another Korean question. Is it possible to have a price indication for the label compliance check? Does the price vary between the US, Canada, and Korea?
I can take that one as well. There are some standard pricing, and there could be some variability. I think that's probably one we could follow up with in more detail via email as well, because it depends on the complexity of the label and things of that nature.
Okay, understood. And what is the difference between accreditation and validation in terms of regulatory compliance?
So typically when we think about accreditation, it is when an accrediting body gives you the authority to do the work you're doing. So when we think about, the work that SGS does in certification, we are accredited by ANAB and JASANS and a number of different accrediting bodies that say we're meeting the requirements of the certification program owners in order to offer certification to our clients. So accreditation is when we're actually reviewed and we're approved to do the work that we do so that we can move forward. So without accreditation, we couldn't offer any of the services we offer for accredited standards. When I think about validation to me is the steps that we take to ensure that something is doing what it's intended to do or is working the way it's intended to do. So they're two very different things in my mind. So Rebecca, I'll toss this to you now and see if you have a different interpretation of accreditation and validation on your side in Nutrisource.
I think we're aligned. I don't have anything to add to that. Thanks.
Jason, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, no, I'm aligned. And also I want to say is that the accreditation is basically, for example, the laboratory having that accreditation to perform the certain tasks or testing and whatnot. The validation itself, it could mean for us from the testing side of things is making sure the method that is being used on the product, it's validated to prove that it works on the product.
Right. And I always like to throw in there when we talk about validation is oftentimes we can use verification data that we take throughout the year to validate a process. So if you're doing the testing and you're following the method and it's working, then you can use that data as a point of validation that it's working the way you want it to.
That was a great question from our presenters. So that was a fantastic question. The next question that we do have is, are NHPS categorized as health functional foods in Korea?
Yeah, I can take that one. They're not immediately recognized. There's not going to be an immediate equivalency, right? But there are some similarities in the regulatory system between the two. Particularly when you think about the requirements for the, both the safety and the efficacy data, for example. So there are some differences, or there will be some differences, but the regulatory aspects are going to be very similar.
Okay. And I think there's one last question. If we were looking to expand into Canada, what should we know about the bilingual aspect? Is this a full requirement?
It is. It's the law. So you must have your labels in French and English, and you have to make sure that it's the right French. So that's where label reviews come into play to help you make sure you get it right. Rebecca, you want to add anything on that?
No, I think that answered it from our side too.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. So it doesn't look like we have other questions to cover in the Q&A box. Is there anything that anyone else wants to add before we wrap up?
I will be at Supply Side West with you, Killian. So anybody that's on the webinar that's going to be there, stop by our booth and we can chat more about any questions that you may have.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you all for joining our webinar today. We really enjoyed having you guys, and we hope that the content was valuable for you. And we look forward to meeting you at Supply Side West.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.